Welcome to the Argosy podcast. I'm your host, Greg Marron, and our guest for today is Cam Cullen, Chief Marketing Officer for Blastwave. Cam, welcome.
Thanks, Greg. Nice to be on the podcast.
Great to have you with us. Can you give us a little bit of background on how you got into technology, some of your history?
Sure. Well, I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Alabama, and I was on an Air Force ROTC scholarship. So I started my career in the Air Force essentially as an engineering officer, building communications networks. And my first two assignments were at the Air Force Information Warfare Center and the National Security Agency, where I got a very good grounding in security and technology. And then I went into the private sector with various networking and security companies over my career. And I've done both product management and marketing kind of interchangeably amongst my roles.
Okay, that's a very good background. Thank you. So you spent years building the Global Internet Phenomena Report at Sandvine, tracking how internet traffic moves globally. What's the through line from studying internet traffic patterns to making OT networks invisible?
Well, at the end of the day, it's actually just curiosity. I was one of those annoying kids that always ask why and how. And if you follow my career progression, I actually have wanted to know more about networking and how networks worked, and then how the applications on the networks worked, and how you could secure that. And actually, the last role I had at Sandvine, where I wrote the Internet Phenomena Report, was a product that could help governments figure out how to protect their critical infrastructure. And that led me obviously right into the Blastwave philosophy of, okay, I understand now how to monitor these networks, but how do you actually turn that into protecting them? So it was kind of a flipping and roles where I recognized that watching wasn't enough, and doing something active is what led me to Blastwave.
Okay, gotcha. So you joined Blastwave in January 2024 as a one-man marketing team at a 24-person company, and you're competing against players with 400 million to 900 million in funding. What made you bet on that in Blastwave?
Well, so I knew the CTO of Blastwave, who I worked with at a previous role. He is a Swedish technology wizard, and I really love working with Swedes and the products that they create because they are very elegant. If you know IKEA and Saab, you know that they're both they're very utilitarian and they're very safe. That's kind of the motto. Mm-hmm. So he built something that was, I thought, very special in terms of how he builds products. And when he introduced me to the CEO of Blastwave, Tom Sego, I immediately got the passion and drive of what Tom was really trying to do with the company was not just make money, although obviously that's a part of any company, but how he wanted to make this his mission to protect and kind of give back something to basically critical infrastructure as a whole. And I really love small companies versus larger companies because everything you do has an outsized impact on what's happening in the company. I can literally look at every day I did something that helped move the company forward, which you don't get in big companies.
Gotcha. Yeah, that is refreshing, right? It kind of drives us to feel like we're useful.
Yes.
So most of the big OT security players, Clarity, Dragos, Zomi, are built around a see everything, respond fast philosophy. And Blastwave's thesis is essentially the opposite: be invisible, so there's nothing to respond to. How did you arrive at that inversion, and why do you think that market went the other direction?
Well, I think the reason the market went that direction initially was because in the OT space, nobody knew what was on the network. So they said, how can we protect what we don't know what's there? So they put a lot of investment in that. But the problem with that is seeing an attack happen doesn't stop it or prevent it. So what we are set out to do at Blastwave is prevent that attack before it starts as much as we can. And if you look at what's happening in the AI-powered world today, the gap between when a vulnerability is found and when it can be exploited has went from weeks to literally hours and minutes now. So the moment a vulnerability gets reported, it's already being exploited in the wild. And if your monitoring system needs to contact a human, say, hey, there's a problem, something's happening, what do you want to do? And then they figure out what to do. By that time, your network is already ransomware locked up and stopped. So we don't think that the reactive nature of security for OT will work because the consequences are not a data breach. It's your power goes out, your water stops or gets poisoned, or the manufacturing line stops running.
Gotcha. Yeah. That does make sense. So network cloaking is the hardest concept for people outside the technical space to grasp. What's your simplest explanation for what it does that a firewall fundamentally cannot do?
Well, so I'll give two geek examples, and then I'll give you a real technology example. The geek example is that if you remember Lord of the Rings, when they went up to the doors of Durin, they had to speak friend in the Elvish tongue to make the door reveal itself. So the idea behind what network cloaking is you don't even know there's a door there unless you know the secret password, essentially. So it is a technology that says, unless you're cryptographically authenticated that we know who you are, you can't even knock on the door. We won't respond to any traffic at all. So it looks like a black hole when someone just sends traffic into that, which is not how a firewall behaves. A firewall will basically reject your packets or respond to allow certain traffic in and out. And that's not how network cloaking is. You essentially cannot discover the network that's behind a block wave system.
Very interesting. You require a human in the loop. The technology does for authentication, biometrics, and QR challenge response specifically designed to block AI from replaying or spoofing credentials. Is it safe to say that AI isn't just improving attacks? It's really changing their fundamental structure.
Yeah, I mean, there have been quite a few reports already from people like Google and Anthropic of people using AI, the AI models to actually generate attacks, and they can do thousands of attacks per second. They can generate the entire attack chain without even requiring a human in that way. So for us, the fact that you have to physically take your camera, point it at the screen, and scan that QR code, and it has to be a very specific device that was initiated by you. This is not something you can trick someone into doing randomly. You'd have to literally own both the computer that the person is on and their mobile device and have rooted both of them to get any hope of actually breaking into that. So by forcing a human in that loop, it basically kills any AI attacks.
Okay, got it. That makes sense how that's set up. Basically in two different ways, right? As far as the computer and also the handheld for the QR code. So you've been one of the most aggressive voices saying AI has broken the old detect and respond model in OT. But a lot of vendors are just bolting AI into legacy products and calling it a transformation. Where's the line between genuine disruption and an upgrade with better marketing?
So I'll maybe make this one a little bit of a longer answer because I think it is kind of the root of what I see the big challenge in the industry and even the engineering teams and the marketing teams that are trying to kind of grapple with this new world when they sell the security solutions to IT or OT. And it really comes down to what Mythos, if you're not familiar with Mythos, it's a model that Anthropic announced that they created specifically to analyze code to determine if there are vulnerabilities in that code. And what they found when they started literally running it against the software that from partners of theirs was it found so many vulnerabilities, including ones in like 30-year-old code that had been open source for years that no one found. And it was finding not just single instances of bugs where someone had memory overflow or something like that, but it actually was creating daisy chains of vulnerability. So there was one specifically, they said it was a 32-step process to cause this bug to happen, which would give you root access to a system. So it's the intuitive thing of understanding how all these systems are hooked together and how the code basically is put together that creates what Mythos can find in vulnerabilities. What that means is you mentioned the 400 million in sales or 900 million or several billion dollars. These companies were built with products that they basically bought a company and they integrated into one. And you have this one product now that does 15, 20 different security functions into a single product. And as someone who's managed God boxes in my past, where we did so many features, doing quality assurance and security testing on those very complicated spaghetti code and complex code paths is very hard to do, especially when it's a cascade of events that causes the problem. So the systems that were built 10, 15 years ago as their foundation, who are now trying to adapt to this model, I actually talked to some CISOs who have been familiar with some of the work that's going on with the members of Project Glasswing, who are actually the vendors that are running this against their code. They said they had so many bugs that they had to literally upgrade their entire portfolio in a single flash upgrade because the interactions between the products was also broken because of these vulnerabilities. So It fundamentally says that if your system wasn't built with a minimalist philosophy and secure by design, and for example, if you have interoperability with 15 different crypto algorithms, for example, that
Mhm.
falling back to older versions is actually what causes a lot of vulnerability. So these systems, I'm not even
Mhm.
sure it's possible to secure them in this environment where AI is going to keep finding bugs and finding bugs and finding bugs. So I think the line comes when you're going to need systems that were built with this kind of simplicity and security in mind to actually survive in today's environment.
Yeah, fascinating. And you built Hackapedia, 23 plus documented, that has 23 documented industrial breaches with full kill chain analysis. When you go back through those incidents, how many would AI have made materially worse versus just faster?
Interestingly, probably fewer than you think. However, when I created Hackapedia, because I wanted to see from, again, a curiosity perspective, if I look at all the hacks, the ones that cause the biggest problems in the industry, things like JBS or Jaguar Land Rover recently, there's a bunch of water hacks that go out there. Surprisingly, most of them were from very mundane events. Unprotected system that had a default password. People
Mhm.
didn't segment their IT and OT networks apart, which was the most by far. It was like 70% or more of the attacks were just that someone got into IT and they just walked right into OT and could do what they wanted. Or stolen credentials, phishing. The one example that was very advanced was that the Jaguar Land Rover. It was actually reported that it was a video phishing where someone acted like they were one of the employees. They used Zoom and AI, and they masqueraded as an employee. They got a password and they went in and did all that they did to the network because they basically fished the credentials from people. With AI, what it will do, there's actually two issues that make AI a little bit scary. First is that a lot of those hacks that happen today are either criminal syndicates, they're just trying to make money, or they are advanced persistent threat groups, which are sponsored nation states, but they're really just probing to see, they're experimenting and testing out what their abilities are in a
Yeah.
hostile environment, which some days you could argue we're getting to more and more hostile environments and things like with the conflicts that are going on. If they want to cause havoc, they're not going to just do ransomware. They're going to actually flip switches and make things happen and turn off safety systems. And that's going to be catastrophic from a physical consequences. It's called cyber physical security at the end of the day for OT. So
Mhm.
they're going to be going with the intent to do harm, which is obviously much more of a troublesome thing. The second part of this is really that AI doesn't fully understand necessarily the system that it's hacking when it's just hacking. And if it issues a command or tries to shut something down that would be harmless in an IT world, in an OT world, that could be the safety system on a power plant or controlling a water spout or water dam and to basically flood the entire valley by turning off valves that are supposed to be on
Mhm.
or blow up something. So an unintended consequence of an AI not truly understanding what it's attacking or being too aggressive could result in consequences of these being so much worse than they are today.
Yeah. Thanks for that background. So Clarity, Dragos, and Nozomi are all investing heavily in AI-powered detection and analytics. If they get good enough to spot, now this may be a productive question. If they get good enough to spot threats in milliseconds, does blast waves prevention first argument start to weaken?
Well, there's two ways to answer that. First is that anytime you can stop an attack before it starts is good, and the less work you want to have these monitoring products do, the better off you are, because that means they can get really good because they have less traffic to deal with. But the second part really comes down to the OT asset owners, which are the people that run the plants and run the water treatments and power plants, etc. They don't trust automated systems enough to understand the second and third level consequences of doing something on that network. So if I flip this switch or I quarantine this device, what does that mean for the rest of the operation of that plant? You could have digital twin models where you actually simulate all the stuff and say, okay, what happens if I turn this off? That's going to take years to fully explore in an operational environment. And by the time a human gets in the loop and actually says, yes, do this, it's already too late because your network is being owned by someone else or being hacked. So I just don't think that in this millisecond world of attacks and AI powered, that anytime you need a human to get in the loop, you're pretty much, it's too late.
Okay, good. I appreciate that, getting that some of that clarity there in the background. So Volt, let's go to Volt Typhoon. That's the Chinese nation state group that sat quietly inside U.S. critical infrastructure for years before anyone noticed. Doesn't that seem like I don't know, an AI problem? It seems like a concealment problem at least. Does that incident vindicate Blastwave's architecture, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, so Volt Typhoon, they're a great example of what's called living off the land, where they got in and they just sat there and kind of did very little other than maybe periodically phoning home and saying, "Hey, here we are, things are still good, and we give you an update." What what's important about preventing things like that first is, they did this all without AI in the past. Now they're going to be able to do it at much larger scale to more networks to get in more. There are more vulnerabilities for it to take advantage of. So those kind of groups are now going to be powered even more than they were before because they're going to have access to more. Essentially, think of it, they're limited today by the number of humans they can have hacking at a keyboard. Now they just create AI agents that are going to do this for them. So their reachability and scalability is going to be higher. There was a briefing I attended a while back by he was the CEO of Huntress, which is a company that sells managed services to small and medium businesses that don't have security experts. So they kind of do this for you. And what he said was that in about 95% of the cases that they see, a human does not have to get involved in the hacking or ransomware, literally in the attack chain, until the ransom value needs to be set by the software. So they do all the reconnaissance, they get into the network, they take over the systems, and they prompt up to the hacker, says, "Okay, how much do we want to charge for the ransomware to lock the system down?" And that's the first time a human gets involved. So these type of groups are just going to be more powerful. And what it's going to do is make the humans involved when a network is too hard to hack. So one of the goals that Blastwave has is to make your network hard to hack. So normally a hacker, if they don't find anything when they do the scan, so if they can't discover your network, for example, with our network cloaking, you just move on to the next target. What we will do is force the humans who work for these Volt Typhoon and other nation state attackers actually have to do the hacking themselves and not have AI. So we're going to make it cost more resources for them to do that. So it's going to be harder for them to succeed. So that's really kind of how we look at, we're going to put that barrier and make AI not be the multiplier that it is for normal hackers today.
Excellent. Very good. So you're a 24-person company that is Blastwave, competing against companies that we mentioned earlier with hundreds of millions in venture funding and Gartner Magic Quadrant placements. When you look at Blastwave's growth right now, what's the actual constraint? Is it awareness? Like you said with the last answer to the last question. I mean, why wouldn't you use Blastwave if you're basically causing almost that AI to pause, right? And
Yes.
having humans get involved. Is it awareness? Is the length of the sales cycle, or is it what the buyers are
Yeah. So,
defaulting to the brand?
OT is definitely notoriously slow at adopting new things. I mean, these are people that still have 50-year-old networking
Right.
equipment in their
Yeah.
system. And
Right.
I mean, literally, we have customers that have Windows XP and Windows 2000 and Windows 98 still in the system. So upgrading is not something they do often. And you actually look, what we see is that in the buying cycle for the customers we're going after, the normal buying cycle for security products is 3 to 5 years. So that's when they flip their network. It's upgrade cycle time. The hardware is out of date and I got to go to a new vendor. Many of those customers will just keep using what they have, the next generation of the same vendor. So for us, we have to build trust in the community, and we're doing that kind of almost. We're looking for the flagship customers in several industries to kind of give that and become our speakers and our advocates and essentially social proof against those larger vendors. So clearly, we're a bootstrap startup. We're not an AI funded that's been given tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars like some of these AI companies are. So we're building a company to be very sustainable. We're using AI internally to amplify. We would say we punch above our weight quite highly because of the people and how we're able to use the technology that we have, and we only hire good people that are kind of best in class at what they do. So it's really for us that resources and getting in front of the right customers. And we have a very specific definition that I put together for what is our ideal customer profile. And often it's a person who runs IT for a company who has now been told, I need to secure the OT part of the network, and I don't necessarily know everything about OT. So I need to go make sure I find out and listen and learn how am I going to protect that. So that is kind of our ideal customer. So really finding out the ways to engage the people in that specific part of the buying cycle is what we work on today.
Okay. Gotcha. So the why change page on your website lists 5 reasons OT operators resist deploying security. Which one of those is the real killer and the one you're still working to solve?
I think it can't happen to be kind of it's not a problem for me, or I'm not going to get hit. The denial is a very powerful tool in the arsenal of someone. And literally, it's funny. You always say, well, you go talk to someone who just got attacked is probably the best possible customer, but it's actually not the best possible customer because they are in a complete panic mode and they're trying to figure things out. What you want is someone whose competitor or someone they know got attacked, because now, okay, the risk, and suddenly they understand the impact. We got several customer opportunities when Jaguar Land Rover got hit by companies that were affiliated or did business with Jaguar Land Rover, who said, well, we don't want this to happen to us. We need to make sure that we secure our network. So, this is one where the customers that use us love us. And we are, in the security world, it's very hard to get customers to go public with their love for you, because you're putting your reputation on the line as well. If you say, oh, they're great, and then they get hacked, someone buys that product and get hacked, it's a problem. So we have to build our brand as trust, and that takes us some time to do. But we are already cash flow positive. We take care of ourselves. We're self-funded. So we're not a company that's going to try and grow so fast that we spin ourselves into bankruptcy.
Yep. It's that elegant product that you mentioned that drew you in, right?
Yes, and it's just it's clean, it's easy to use. It makes sense. And for someone who's anyone that's used a Palo Alto or a Fortinet firewall or a Checkpoint firewall, when you go into their tabs and you see 50 different things you can configure for a single use case or IP address, it just gets confusing as to what I've actually done. And one of the things we actually see that encourage our customers when we showed that interface, like, well, it would take me a year to learn how to be a professional engineer for this firewall. I can figure this out by myself in a day. So simplicity is part of our power and our solution.
Gotcha. Now, when you came on board there, you rebuilt the Blastwave website and drove 200,000% traffic growth in under 3 months as a one-man team. Then pivoted to LLM geo search optimization, and now ranked #1 across multiple AI search engines simultaneously. What are you doing differently that most marketing teams aren't? And is this moving the revenue needle or just the visibility needle?
So it's helped with both. What the market wants now is that they want to ask a question and get an answer. In the old search model, you hit it, you put in a keyword, and then you hope that you were in the top 10 pieces of that, and you were part of. You're the first one I see, therefore that's what I'm doing. And when I joined the company, I got us and some of the keywords like network cloaking and others. We were #1 in the rankings, and it helped us get visibility in the things. If someone was searching for that, then they would find us. Now, one of the challenges is not a lot of people search for that because not everyone knows what it is. But those that do, they find us. In the answer space, what I really did was I focused on what's the question that someone's going to ask, which results in the search engine saying, well, okay, let me find out, or the LLM, like Gemini, for example, with Google, or ChatGPT, or any of these. If someone asks a question, they have very specific formats they look for, like easy bullet points and explanations that go into detail and that are well written and easy to read in the process. So I redid the entire site with that kind of questions and answers in mind. And the content isn't just marketing fluff. It's actual, here's how this works, a step-by-step implementation guide. So it's much more detailed. We even put together, we have something called the Hackapedia, which you mentioned, which is explorations of some of the biggest attacks in the OT space. We have a glossary, which defines like OT security terms, which not everyone knows, which again gives us more visibility and rankings. So it's helped create a little bit of authority with us in like the on LinkedIn whenever we do a Hackapedia blog. So one of the things that I've done is the anniversary of every one of the Hackapedia attacks, I'll write a blog specifically about that hack and we do a video to accompany that. So those get literally millions of views on LinkedIn just because they're a very topical issue that people are interested in. So we get, again, you have to use curiosity to drive that opportunity for people. So that's kind of what I play on and how I've structured our site as part of that.
Yeah, wonderful. So using those, giving people a little bit, feeding their curiosity, but also giving them something educational, something that can benefit themselves in their career or,
Yes.
wherever
My
they may be,
target
right?
for our website is not the CEO or the CFO or the CISO. It's the engineer that's got to do this every day and who's the one actually looking for the solution that's going to go to his boss and say, hey, this is what we need to buy. That's the person that I create the site for. It's not a marketing fluff site that's going to basically give you happiness, but not tell you. You go to some sites and you can't even figure out what the company does, much less how they do it. And I've tried to make sure that they know how we do it on our site as much as I can.
And that scratches the engineering itch in you that you mentioned, that how does this work, right? That all
Yes.
engineers have, right? Right. And
Yes.
that's
I mean,
kind of
I open
a
a lot of white
curiosity thing.
papers. Yeah, like for example, network cloaking. It is something that it's a significant differentiator for us. But people always say, well, how is that different than a firewall? So we did a white paper which very much explains step by step how you configure that and what it does and how well the technologies that are involved in that. Because the people who really understand, like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I can fix any problem I have in my security on my network now. But it's because they understand and see the power of the technology that sits behind.
Gotcha. And most of the industries that you're going after have compliance mandates. How much of your pipeline is we have to do this as far as cybersecurity in actually relation to securing these OT networks, as opposed to we want to do this?
Usually you get a compliance pipeline when a new specification comes out. For example, NERC which is the power specification security, just lowered the power wattage to, I think it was 100 megawatts or something like that, which basically is battery storage system facilities now also have to comply with some of the security requirements for power. So we got a little spurt of new people who came in. When NIST 2 came out for Europe, we had some incoming as part of that. When in the Middle East, they had a couple of new security regulations for critical infrastructure. In Australia, recently had some new specifications. So when they come out, you will see a spurt of pipeline created as a result of that. But what more often happens is people initially, when IEC 62443 came out or NERC, they put a product in and they checked all the boxes. And then as they used that product, they realized, it checks the box, but it actually isn't making me secure. It's just checking the box because it does something. So what we are often getting is they found out what they thought was solving the problem actually wasn't. So we're the second order solution to that. Okay, now I want to really solve it the right way, so I'm going to go look for someone else. So we get a lot of second generation business off of those standards.
Really educating the users, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Hackapedia entries that stay with people, the Oldsmar water treatment hack, the old SCADA attack, aren't just business disruptions. People, as you were mentioning earlier, they can really impact, the people in the area, whether it's flooding a valley because of valves not being shut off, and and it can go on and on as far as depending on what the hack is. People could have been hurt, right? Does
Yes.
working in critical infrastructure OT security feel different from other cybersecurity work because of that?
And so, as I mentioned, when I talked to Tom, I kind of got that passion about what he's trying to do, and he wants to help. And when you look at the danger, and I'll use one specific issue. You mentioned Oldsmar Dam, and the water industry specifically is one that it's kind of a pet market for me. These are typically very small municipalities. They have one guy that's doing everything for all of their security. They have a very small team. They don't have a lot of money. And they go to some of these larger companies and they literally charge them $500,000 for a firewall and remote access system that we could sell them for $10,000. So I think from a job satisfaction and personal satisfaction perspective, doing a job that I know I'm actually helping keep things running in society and I'm doing good, Google used to say, don't be evil. You don't always get to think that the stuff you're doing is a good for society, but this job, I actually have a lot of satisfaction that I know I'm doing something that is helping prevent catastrophes on a daily basis. So yes, I think I get more job satisfaction out of this than I have from any of my other roles, potentially with the exception of maybe when I worked at NSA, which obviously you're doing at the highest level there.
Yeah, that's insightful. So if like a CISO is at a mid-range manufacturer is listening right now and they're still running VPNs for OT remote access, what's the one thing you want them to walk away thinking about?
They should never be using passwords anymore. That's the biggest one. Again, credentials theft. Phishing is up like 4,300% since ChatGPT came out. 70 some odd, 80 some odd percent of attacks are leakage from IT to OT networks so if you have bad passwords and you don't have the right segmentation, you will get hit. It all comes down to how bad it is and who does it and what their level of maliciousness is. Nowadays, literally, you could have someone walk into a coffee store or a factory store or a Target or Walmart, decide that they got treated badly by this particular clothes manufacturer that didn't deliver what they wanted, or they got mad at the price. So they can now go to an AI and say, help me hack this company and mess them up. And they will. So, I think if you have any exposure at all, you probably will be hit in the next couple of years for sure. So you need to make sure you do as much as you can to prevent that from happening, because we talk a lot about data breaches and IT and your credit cards are stolen. But if your factory isn't running, you're not making any money. And that's the bottom line for any company that's building something. So that infrastructure is far more important than your IT infrastructure.
Yeah, we appreciate those words of wisdom, but also urgency. So where can people find Hackapedia?
So if you go to blastwave.com, which is our website, the actual URL for it is hackapedia.blastwave.com. We'll take you directly to that. And it does explores kind of on a one-by-one basis what we consider to be 23 of the biggest hacks. As you mentioned, Oldsmar is the Ukraine power. There's a number of the Triton hack. We don't actually talk about Stuxnet because it's kind of been done to death. We mentioned the Target hack, which was, interestingly enough, one of the few attacks where someone got into Target's HVAC contractor and then used that to get into IT. So they used OT to get into IT and then stole all the credit cards, which is the one case where someone actually did the opposite of got into OT and then went into IT. But it's interesting because what I was doing was I wanted to go through and see what were the commonalities amongst all of these kind of infamous hacks that if a CISO can prevent these types of vectors from getting in, how can they prevent that? Basically, don't let your network become the next Hackapedia case study. That's kind of the motto. And we found so many commonalities that, it comes down to if you don't have passwords and you segment your network and people can't discover that you have vulnerabilities or unpatched systems, if you take care of those three things, you're pretty much golden against today's hacking environment. You just have to do those three things and you'll fix yourself.
That's good. And that's nice for people to hear those steps, right? Because sometimes people don't know where to start.
Yeah, and it's very easy to start. I mean, one of the things that sounds so hard. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you make sure you lock down that remote access. You mentioned the CISO that has the VPN. He's using that. That's the first thing you want to fix because that is the back door essentially into controlling the entire network. Next, then you do your network cloaking so that people can't see your OT network. And since you've already done remote access, the right people can get into that infrastructure. And then you can slowly do a little bit of segmentation on the back end so that you can control the spread of any attack that might get through that network so that if it just can affect one system and not your entire infrastructure. So it's a very logical, it doesn't require network re-architecture. You can do this without disrupting your entire business, which is a huge benefit for operational companies that want to keep uptime happening in their factories.
Gotcha. Thank you. So Cam, what is Blastwave in 2 years and what does winning look like?
So winning for me continues to be, I think we have now over 500,000 device hours without being hacked yet by hackers. So continuing our streak of not letting any of our customers get hacked is our first big win. And that's kind of our goal, is to keep it that way. And I think in 2 years, what we'll see is that bigger names will be using us I mean, we have a couple of deals already over $1 million a year each, so they're continuing to propel us forward. But bigger brand names that are more willing to put their name behind it. So we'll be not so much the best kept secret in the industry. We'll be one that everyone's talking about. That's my goal.
Excellent. So where can people find you and Blastwave?
So blastwave.com is our website. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube as well. We've got a lot of good content to help people educate people who may be getting into OT or OT security and trying to learn a lot. I put a lot of focus on, again, the glossary will help you understand some of the terms. The Hackapedia will walk you through some of the hacks. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Cam Cullen on LinkedIn as well. So we'd love to educate you. And if you don't want to buy it, that's fine. Just learn, interact. And for us, if I'm helping people get better at security, even if they don't buy my product, I'm still consider that a win.
Right. Educate, and they come back to the education. Eventually, I think they become customers. Generally,
Yeah.
they
Build
feel
the
comfortable.
brand.
They trust you,
Exactly.
right? I think trust is huge. Yep. Cam Cullen, Chief Marketing Officer from Blastwave. Thanks for joining the Argosy podcast today.
All right. Thank you very much.